God be with you. The time is 46 minutes after the hour. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com. It's the only company I trust to protect my wealth. Call 800-BUICO. Well, I asked Mr. Trump 4 questions. If you missed it, you'll probably catch it a little later. What would you do right now to stop ISIS if you were president? When you are president, will you deport all of the Muslim refugees that Obama's bringing in? What is Obama's real reason for flooding America with Muslims right now when 30 states say no? And then I said, you took a lot of heat for attacking Carson. Don't you think all the Republican candidates should agree to attack Hillary, not each other, during future debates? I thought it was a very good and very pointed interview, and I'd like to hear your opinion of the Donald Trump interview for a few minutes. Joyce on WMAL, fire away. What's on your mind?
I want to tell you that I appreciate your talking with him about attacking Carson. We are for Donald Trump, but we also like Dr. Carson, and I feel like that if Trump is elected, that he will put Dr. Carson in a position. But when it comes to the talking with Hillary, they're going to face these things again.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you very much for that. Right, I like Donald Trump more than all of them. And the other guys, there's not one of them who wouldn't be a better president than Hillary and Bill Clinton. Not any one of them up there, with the exception perhaps of Jeb Bush, would not make a better president. Does that make sense to you? Any Republican would be a better president than Hillary, except Jeb Bush, who's no different than Hillary. I mean, you know, that's a clear statement. But I like Donald's response to me when he said, I know you were unhappy with what I said about Carson. Apparently everything gets back to him, right? But he was a big enough man to come on the show and not say, screw him, I'm never coming on that show. Let Savage go you know where. He didn't do that. Now, I got to tell you something. I've been in the business 21 years. Ted Cruz won't come on the show. Carson won't come on the show. None of the others will come on the show. They don't have the guts to face me or the American people through the Savage Nation. Donald Trump does, even though I was critical of his attacks on Carson. That tells you more about Donald Trump than you already knew, and it is newsmaking, by the way. It's news that he'll come on a show where a host criticized them. Can you name one other host who criticized the candidate, and then the candidate then went on a show? I can't name that person. But having said that, I'll say something else. He really caught me off guard, Donald, when he said, you would have been, he said, if you were up there, you would have been tougher. No, he said, you're competitive, I'm competitive. He said, you know and I know that if you were up there instead of me, you would have attacked Carson probably more viciously than I, than I did. I have to admit he's right. I mean, if I were up there fighting to win and to be preeminent over the other people in the pack, I probably would have gone after him tooth and claw. That's the nature of the human being. If we're competitive, right? Tell me what field people don't compete in. Take a look at that. Take a look at the female martial artist, what happened last week. You remember that with Rusi, whatever her name was? The first, is it Diane Rusi? She was the odds-on favorite, and the other girl caught her with a kick to the neck that knocked her out in the first round, second round? You talk about competition? A swift kick to the neck in a match like that ended the match immediately. Well, that's the way competition works. And right now, ISIS is kicking us not only in the neck, but kicking us in our genitals. And you know what we have going back? Slaps. Oh, stop kicking us in the you-know-where, please, Mr. ISIS, as he backslaps them. Backslaps them, that's all he's doing. And now Russia's sending in 150,000 brave warriors to do what needs to be done. And as I said before, Jake Tapwater is not going to be in the pack in a fatigue jacket following him with a handy cam. No, my friends, there's going to be no body cams on the Russian special forces as they kick indoors and throw in the grenades. You will not be seeing it on CNN tonight. This is the Savage Nation. Another 2 hours. Be here or be nowhere to learn more about Government Zero.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected thought, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
ISIL seeks to exploit the idea that there is a war between Islam and the West. And when you start seeing individuals in positions of responsibility suggesting that Christians are more worthy of protection than Muslims are in a war-torn land, that feeds the ISIL narrative. It's counterproductive. And it needs to stop.
Sounds like Frito. I think we should play the Frito soundbite because this is Frito lying through his teeth, because he is actually saying that Muslims are more worthy of protection than Christians in a war-torn land. And that feeds the paranoia narrative that he's working for the enemy. So let's hold it. Listen to what preceded this from Barry Soetro in clip number 2, and then we'll go to Frito.
When candidates say we wouldn't admit 3-year-old orphans, that's political posturing. When individuals say that we should have a religious test and that only Christians, proven Christians, should be admitted, that's offensive and contrary to American values.
Yeah,
I cannot think of a more potent recruitment tool for ISIL than some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of here during the course of this debate.
Send Fredo off to do this, send Fredo off to do that. Let Fredo take care of some Mickey Mouse nightclub somewhere. I can handle things, I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart, and I want respect.
So we didn't elect Sonny, we didn't elect Michael, we elected Frito. But in this case, Frito had a deep voice. He didn't sound like he was missing one, you-know-what. He was Frito with a deep, booming voice, and you fell for the trap. We've heard of a honey trap, haven't we? What would you call Obama's trap? His booming voice is his single greatest attribute. And you were taken in by his voice, weren't you? But underneath it all, there's Frito. It's not Sonny, the war leader. It's not Michael, the calculating leader of the family. It's the weak son that we elected in this Shakespearean drama. Now, if this were just a movie, it would be amusing and we could move beyond it. But people are now dying because of him. And to top it off, he's importing Syrian Muslim refugees who are not primarily orphans and women, but primarily men of military age. So he's a liar on three accounts. That's number one. Now, one of the big lies that's being put out by the illegitimate left is, of course, about the Jews. And we have to go into that. Today, of course, as you'd expect, I was waiting for this to happen. I knew that the day would come, and it came today. The so-called Washington Post put out an article saying that what's going on against the Syrians is identical to the negative attitudes being expressed towards Syrian refugees today. That's put out by the liberals at the Washington Post. And they dug back, and they found sentiments that support their lying position. And they showed a survey from the Gallup poll of 1938, which said that the refugees who were then Jewish were being seen in the same way that the Syrian refugees are being said today. Now, of course, you know this is a fallacious analysis, as you would expect from people with an optic chiasm that's damaged. And the Post's Dana Milbank, whoever that is, put out the same fetid argument that the Republicans are creating a xenophobic bidding war in their efforts to keep refugees out. And then once again, they bring in the Jews. But let me tell you something. To compare the two situations is not only ludicrous, it's mentally unbalanced. I didn't read anything about Jews in the 1930s planning a jihad against the West. I didn't read anything about the Jews in the 1930s secretly plotting to kill innocent people in the streets or at sporting events or on ships, at concert venues. You know it's a false equivalency. You know that this is the stock and trade of illegitimacy. And you know that the liberals are lying through their teeth once again. Of course, there's a degree of truth in this fallacious argument. Of course, there's going to be bigotry in any group that wants to oppose the importation of refugees. But by and large, they're forgetting the big situation. Is that we are a Judeo-Christian society. We are not a Muslim Judeo-Christian society. There's not a Muslim Christian society. There's a great incompatibility between Muslims and Christians. Just understand that's a reality. If you don't understand it, then learn a little bit more about what I'm saying. Are there some racists among those saying no asylum? Sure. Almost certainly so. But the vast majority of Americans who are opposed to Muslims being brought in from Syria and Iraq are really not concerned with the religion or the ethnicity of the refugees. It's not being able to know whether they're coming here to harm us or not. And common sense would dictate that you don't bring them in at a time like this. That's the opening to hour number 2 of The Savage Nation. I also had Donald Trump on in the last hour. Many people want to comment on that interview. Phone number here is 855-400-7282. Nick on WFTL in Florida. Go ahead, please. You're the first up this hour.
Michael, that was a brilliant interview. And coming from a military and police family, I'm a retired police sergeant. I was so impressed. And I did dignitary protection for Trump at events. Not him specifically, but the people who were there. A lot of, high caliber people that were at these functions at the Waldorf and so forth, at those venues. And he's going to win. He's going to win by a landslide. But the media will never admit this, of course, never.
Oh, no, I'm sure that if there was an election today, he'd win like 75-25 against Hillary. America is dying for a strong man. They're sick and tired of her corruption. They're sick and tired of the fact that she caused this refugee crisis with her insane Arab Spring concept, and she is doubling down on it, and no one's calling her on it. Would you expect Jake Tapwater to call her on it? That fraud? That fraud in the media? The frauds in the media won't call her on it. Instead, they save their worst rhetoric for the American people themselves.
Correct.
Well, I'm glad you heard the interview. It was an important one because I frankly didn't think Donald would ever come back on the show, and I dared criticize him about the comments about whatever his name is. I forget his Carson. And he did. I'm sending you a copy of what? If you name it, you gain it. What's the book you're getting for Thanksgiving?
Government Zero.
You got it. Only under one condition, that you put it out with the turkey. And I mean after the oven, not before the oven.
Of course.
You got to put it out on a Thanksgiving table, so when you get your crackpot liberal relatives there, you don't even have to say anything. They may say, "What's that?" And say, "That's a best-selling book right now, and I'd like to discuss some of the damage that the Democrat liberals have done to this country." Thank you. Stay on the line. There was one question I asked him that I didn't get a real answer to, and that was, what is Obama's real reason for flooding America with Muslims right now when so many states are saying no? He did not go where I wanted him to go, nor did I expect him to go during a radio interview that could be used against him. The president is not only dividing the country over terrorism, his response to the Paris attacks are the opposite of what you'd expect from a commander-in-chief whose sole job, number one job, is to protect his people. This man is clearly not protecting the American people, because even if there's even a slight or remote chance that amongst these refugees there will be bombers, the logical conclusion is that at a time like this, we're not bringing them in. We're going to build a safe haven for them in Syria. We're going to cordon it off. We're going to protect it with UN troops who have nothing to do. My idea from over a month and a half ago. And we're not bringing them in here. It makes no sense. Is Obama crazy? Is he stupid? Is he locked into his doxy so sufficient that he can't even see beyond his doxy? All of those things are probably true. After what happened in Paris to bring in Muslim refugees is insanity. 855-400-7282. Is Obama a sleeper himself? Well, he may be asleep, but I don't know that he's a sleeper. We know that Germany has a worst lady. We have a so-called first lady, but they have a worst lady. W-U-R-S-T. Just a little pun intended there. Yes, Merkel's become a worst lady. Spell it whichever way you wish in English. She is really a worst lady. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call